Our next guest is entrepreneur and best-selling author, Paul Byrne. I think we're about 36 hours, maybe just a little over 24 hours from the publication of Adapt or Die, the Real AI Playbook. Ignore at your own peril, how founders and CEOs will successfully navigate the world of AI. Paul, welcome. Good to see you. How you been?
Thanks very much, Christian. Yeah, I've been doing great. I just threw the book up onto the screen real quick. Honestly, like, I had a great time doing it, and you can still get it on Amazon. If you get the Kindle version, it's only $4.99. If you get the actual printed version, I think that's $12.99. But if you end up meeting me at a conference or something, you can probably get your hands on a free one. So
awesome.
I'm more than happy.
Well, congratulations on the launch. Yeah, I know. Yesterday I was watching the numbers tick up, and you hit I was texting around. You hit a couple number one spots, I think, in certainly generative AI. I think in entrepreneurialism, and maybe you hit number 5 on another list. But that's an amazing day.
So things kept going through the night and into this morning.
Okay.
And so I captured the number one position in 6 categories, including management, and also including artificial intelligence and machine learning. So great. I got really quite a few more than I expected, and I think I ended up number 2 in computer science overall, which is a big category. Even though the book is only kind of, I wouldn't say tangentially, but it's only partially about computer science. It's really not written for people who are tech savvy, although somebody who is tech savvy would appreciate the book. But I wrote it because and I had a conversation just a couple days ago, which highlighted the whole reason and sort of summarized the conversations I've been having with people. So I started doing these top-to-top conversations. So I run Rizoyo. I'm the founder and president of Rizoyo. And I started doing these top-to-top meetings this year. And I had my first top-to-top just this week. And I was speaking to a client who runs a large business out of the Midwest. They have locations in, I think, 12 different states and a large online presence. And he was telling me about his plans for how they're implementing AI. And there were 2 things that I thought from that conversation were just incredibly prescient and really spoke to my book. So the first one was, he said, I've been holding off doing anything with AI until somebody credible walked through the door. And he said, I did about, he did about 10 different presentations with companies who promised him, in theory, we can do this or that with AI and automation to improve your business, but none of them had anything to show. None of them had actually implemented it. Right. And I think that's a really good point to make. There are so many, because these little agencies have found out there's a ton of money to be made by selling people on something that you don't really know how to do, or that can't be done. A lot of them, they're just kind of outsourcing. There are a lot of these front ends that are just sort of landing a project and then looking to, wherever they go overseas or even, in the States for somebody to fulfill a contract. So you got to be careful. Have them show you something, tell them, have them tell you who on their team did it and all that sort of thing.
Right.
You don't want somebody that has no idea what they're doing. And it's challenging because AI and automation, this whole surge that's been going on over the past pretty much 12 to 18 months, has been huge. Right? And everybody sees it as an opportunity, and not only a way to save cost, but a way to improve your product or service, whatever you have. And so that's one of the things is there's just so many people have just been kind of sitting on the sidelines, and you should until you really know and you feel confident.
Right.
The other thing he said was, I don't know what to think of it. I don't know what's going to happen. It could leapfrog. We've seen technologies which have kind of folded into the LLMs, there were all of these sort of LLM, large language model, like large language models like ChatGPT or Grok or, Claude or something like that. And people were writing these programs that basically took whatever input you gave them, gave it a prompt, and returned it. Like there was almost no value added, right?
Yeah.
To these, to some of these initial SaaS offerings, or very little value added. It just kind of specialized your answer in a certain direction. And most of the LLMs have kind of outgrown that sort of thing. And so those people, they went like this and this, and their business just kind of crashed.
Yeah.
So that's something to be careful of. But, more and more of what we're doing is getting kind of, merged into the LLMs and to whatever large language model you're using at the time. And so, you don't want to overpay for something that is just going to be part of the LLM in the future. So understanding what's going to get incorporated, what's not, what that direction is going is one of the reasons I wrote this book. Is a lot of people are just kind of afraid to invest in AI, which is the wrong thing to do.
Right.
You really want to invest. You really want to utilize it because it is the tool of the future. And a lot of people are just afraid of that. And so that's kind of why I wrote the book, is I've just had so many conversations with people who just don't know what to think of it. They don't know where it's going. Mm-hmm. They don't know, what the future is going to portend for it. So that's kind of, that was kind of my, I guess, motivation for it, as I just saw the need for it.
So I think I strongly agree with you. Well, I think one of my questions is, or I suspect most people or many companies are still like the person you just met, sort of super interested, hearing all the hype, but not really ready. I mean, you talk about landing projects. I think there are a lot of agencies, a lot of consultants out there, waving the flag saying, "Hey, I can do this for you."
Yeah.
And then you've got these companies that are super interested. They know they need to do something. They're overwhelmed and they need some kind of guidance. But I don't think I think finding the right people and your book, I think, has a lot of the right messaging. Yeah. In terms of what it can and what it can't do. It's a little bit of a level set. It's like, hey, don't believe the hype, and there's limitations to what it can do, and you need to be using it in some way with these guardrails. I mean, it was very helpful in that regard. But in terms of today, I feel my biggest I guess not concern, but observation. Personally, I feel like it's phenomenal technology that can be super helpful to a certain degree within limits. And the earlier you can start to, and it's strange and it's multifaceted, and it's a very powerful kind of potential toolkit or toolbox or tool set, right? There's so many different things you can do with it if you apply it in the right way. Yeah. But you got to start doing, something.
Yeah.
And so I'm just, so how did that conversation end? He's like, "Hey, I've been waiting for somebody who can speak credibly, somebody who's not just talking, who can actually show me some stuff." Where did that conversation go?
It went in a couple directions. So one, it gave me an opportunity to kind of show some of the things that Rosolio's done, and showcase that. And I don't know if he'll act on that or include us, but he did, finally narrow it down to one guy or one company that he thinks can help him. And he sort of walked me through it. They had only really done like one real implementation, which was a little concerning, but still that's one more than 90% of the agencies out there. So, so I'm like, that would give me a pretty good confidence level. I think the other thing, in terms of that conversation was, I think he felt better afterwards when I introduced him to a few of the principles that I talk about in the book.
Yeah. Okay.
And those key learnings. So I think that, I think a little bit of knowledge. And the problem with getting knowledge about it is if you read a book, it was written 3-4 years ago, you know, you think, oh, that's just going to be irrelevant. And it might be, you know, it could be irrelevant. I started doing presentations. The first one I did was at a meetup here in the Dallas area. But then I also went in to teach a couple of classes at UNT on artificial intelligence at University of North Texas up in Denton. And those classes kind of showed me how, you know, the Gen Zers view the artificial intelligence. And the thing that kind of shocked me was that they were just as confused and worried about it as anybody else. And the number one concern on everybody's mind was, you know, I'm spending 4 years getting a college degree. Am I just going to be replaced with ChatGPT? Yeah. And that's a really good question. It depends on what your degree's in, to be honest. But you know, to me, it's a different thing. You know, to me, college is all about learning how to think differently and think critically. And that it doesn't matter what you study. That's not going to go out of style.
I agree with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, my dad kind of had this thing. He had a PhD. I think I told you he was a rocket scientist, right? So he had a PhD in aeronautical engineering, something like that. And he said that you know, your bachelor's degree, you learn how to read. Your master's degree, you learn how to think. And your PhD, you learn how to learn. And
interesting.
I don't think you have to get to the PhD to learn how to learn. It took me longer. It probably took me an extra 15 years because I didn't, you know, I stopped at the master's. But the you know, but you can learn how to learn, and that will serve you, you know, in whatever you do. Because as you know, like if you perform and you create and produce something, you know, people will see you as valuable.
So let's go through some of the principles in the book, because I agree. I mean, I agree with you on these things, and I actually think that, you know, that's a critical point, that the more you're creating at this point, the more you're living in the tools. I think it's a huge advantage. At the same time, you know, I used to say, I said, hey, like, look, if you're not living in the tools right now, you're going to fall behind. Yeah. And one of the super interesting pushbacks I got was, Christian, I don't want to live in the tools. What I want to hear from you is you're living in the tools, so I don't have to, right? Which is great. Which is great for business, right? I'm like, okay, that's good. Yeah. That said, you know, if you're on that side of servicing, you know, serving others with these technologies, what is it about your book? I know I mean, the type 1 and type 2 thinking was super helpful about the limitations. We can get into that in a minute, perhaps, or maybe we start there with that, because I've got some questions for you about. I think, you know, your opinion or your perspective on type 1 and type 2, I think has a very stark contrast with what's potentially the hype that's happening in the market, which is how amazing these things are that are almost, you know, about to approach human level or beyond human level reasoning. But one of your main points in the book is we're perhaps quite far from that.
Yeah. So I think type 1 and type 2 reasoning is probably the number one insight that, and that's why I moved that chapter up to quite early in the book to introduce the idea of type 1 and type 2 thinking. And it's really, to put it in a nutshell, it's the difference between sort of reactive at the moment thinking. So you think about if you're taking a test, and as you go down and you're answering questions on the test, there's some that you just know because you've either memorized the answer or you know it's a math test, you know exactly how to solve that issue and you just jump into it, right? That's kind of type 1 thinking, and it uses a different part of the brain, and I'm not a neuroscientist, so I'm not going to try to pronounce those names, but it uses a different part of the brain than type 2 thinking. And type 2 thinking is reflective thinking. It's reasoning. It's mapping out an answer. It's reflecting, acting, seeing what happens, and kind of going back. So where you have to really think through, and you think of it as the case where you're learning something new, right? Like one of the famous examples that gets brought up quite a bit is, learning how to drive. So a 15-year-old or 16-year-old with about 20 hours of practice can kind of teach themselves how to drive proficiently enough that, we'll give them a license and let them drive down the road, right? And some of them probably drive better than I do. But for the most part, right, you're learning on your own. Well, learning on your own requires that type 2 thinking. And we're not there yet. And, the research on that is proceeding. It's going slowly. I think there's a really interesting thing going on behind the scenes that was in the news recently about Yann LeCun, who was the top AI researcher at Meta, who left there to form his own business. And he has been focusing on projects in the type 2 thinking area. And I'm guessing he left the money pot to form his own business because he thinks he's near a breakthrough. But the other thing is, it's going to happen over a longer period of time than we think. And this is something that, Steve Jobs said back in, I think it's 2006 or 2008 about, the iPhone, is that, well, it was just kind of a convergence of technologies. And even though it kind of seemed to spring onto the scene all at once and changed everything, what really changed that product came, a year and a half later, which was the App Store, which, it was really, really cool. But what made it, the killer app was the fact that you could download apps, you could do new things with it, other than, browse the internet and manage your calendar and stuff like that. So I think I think the pace of implementation is going to be slower than most people think, and that's the fear. So we were just talking about this at our company. We develop these products and these SaaS platforms, and we were saying, okay, so we're going to develop a new service. How long is it going to take before AI basically makes this irrelevant? And that's how we judge everything. And we've stopped thinking about ourselves really as competing in the marketplace with other agencies, and we just consider our number one competitor LLMs at this point. So if somebody can do what we're proposing off the bat with an LLM without like some really in-depth prompt design and things like that, then there's no reason to develop that. Even if we can see that that's going to be possible in 2 or 3 years, we're just going to develop around it, right? Or we may include that as part of the feature, but we're not going to make that the core capability of a product. It just doesn't make any sense anymore to do that. But, so those are a couple of the things, is type 1, type 2 thinking, then the pace that this is all going to take. And our view of the pace of things getting rolled out, et cetera, I think has been clouded by the fact that, early on the first LLMs were amazing, even though they weren't really useful, right? You think of GPT-1, even GPT-2. GPT-2 was kind of revolutionary as far as we could tell, but it was really an evolutionary change. It was still not very practical. It wasn't until 3 or 4 that you could really build something around it and sort of rely on it. But that, just think of like the last couple of rollouts, think of the last 12 months as compared to the 2 years prior to that. Does it feel like things are accelerating, or does it feel like things are slowing down?
I mean, I have noticed a market slowdown. It feels now accessible to kind of either not catch up, but stay in this, a proficient area that you're not feeling like every day something's coming out where you're like, no, I can't catch up.
Yeah. And I think that's it, right? I think it is slowing down. And there are a couple of reasons for that. It faces a lot of headwinds. So the CEO of Anthropic at Davos just said one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. I'm sorry. He may be smarter than I am, but what he said was really dumb. is he said, like, why would you invest in software engineering when that's going to be automated away in 12 months? And I've got really bad news for him. It's not going to be automated away in 12 months. Now, it maybe he needs to make pronouncements like that because he's got to try to boost up, his the valuation of his company so he can afford all that capex. But but it's not. It's not even on that path. And there's some very serious headwinds in terms of software engineering. First of all, you talk to any one of my developers who are really good at using AI, by the way.
Yep.
And they all use Claude Code, so they use an Anthropic tool for that, right? Thank you, CEO of Anthropic. But you talk to any one of them, it's a roller coaster. They'll get in a groove and it's doing great and it's writing code well, and then it makes this really bad decisions that they have to go back and correct, right? So it's only a minor improvement in their productivity. And
interesting.
Yeah, minor, substantial, but minor, right? They're not able to 2x, 3x, 10x their work, right? It's maybe a 10.
So let's circle back on that for a second because I think so. Okay, we don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of uncertainty, and is it Dario Amodei? Is that the name of the?
I can't remember his name. Sorry, I should have looked.
Well, I saw the conversation with him, and I think Demis Hassabis was them at Davos. Interesting conversation, and I love that you picked up on something that you strongly disagree with. But bringing it back to today, because I do. So you and I have had a little bit of a tension on this for a while, which is I'm coming at it from a non-technical standpoint, and I got the vibe coding bug. I loved it. Yeah. And at some point you said, be careful, like that, there's something about dangerous code in there. And that's always stuck out to me. However, in direct experience, I quickly realized that although it was phenomenal for prototyping, it is I call it a house of cards. Yeah. And literally, stupid me, I built this nice little vibe coding thing that was super cool, and you could, it was a little bit of a dog and pony show, but interesting enough. And then we were in the summit on a virtual Zoom, and I was trying to change like just the title of the tool, and it broke. It broke. It would stop. It stopped working.
And like maybe wiped out your repository and your data. It was. Well, then I had to scramble, and I was trying to revert to different history, and it was a mess. It was a cluster. So that was one experience on this end, and since then I've learned, and I think this is the biggest gap in terms of where I see the market right now of really getting tangible, what I call enterprise grade or stable solutions into the market. So vibe coding is extremely helpful to me. Now it's like the modern day version of a PowerPoint. Like rather than me explaining it in slides, I can just go, look, this is kind of what I'm thinking of. Yeah. It can't go any farther. It's really just a demo. It's mostly useful to me. Sometimes I do an audience of one or an audience of three where a couple of users in it can play around with it, and that's good. But then when you get to, hey, let's put this into production, this is where, from your end, you're talking about your developers who are skilled with AI. And I think those are becoming super valuable because now I've got enough, again, just in direct experience and some observations of others, these ideas, the flood of ideas of creative thinkers who are able to sort of give you a real understanding of what could be in this software digital world. Right. Now you need a developer to come in. I don't even know, is it an AI engineer? Is it again a developer who really understands AI? Yeah. But you saying it's maybe 2x or 3x from what I've seen with, again, evolutions of Claude Code or what have you, coming at, again, starting to work with folks who are coming at it from that more technical standpoint. Right. It still seems like it is a extremely powerful and
faster. It's faster, cheaper, and better.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Yeah. So think about developers. These are people who get into violent arguments, and I mean like death threats, over which text editor they use to write their code with. You have the Vim and Emacs and Studio and all this stuff, and they all swear by what they use. And I literally seen people get into physical altercations at developer conferences over these kinds of arguments. Right? But it's because by mastering Vim and their vimrc file, which automates things exactly to their style of coding, right? They get a 5% or a 7% improvement in their ability to write and edit code, which, by the way, is 10% of the job. 90% of their time they're spending reading it, right? So so it's like this really marginal gain, but super valuable to them because it makes their job less tedious. And to me, that's like one of the big ahas of LLMs and automation that we've been able to implement with this is it reduces tedium. And when your job's less tedious, it does a lot for morale. I
agree with that 1,000%. The drudgery and the tedium of it and it's not gone, but a lot of it's gone. It's like, hey, my first experience, maybe I've said this before on the podcast, was it was the month after ChatGPT, the first round, December 2022.
Okay.
I was putting together a contract in January, and I got the verbal, and I know all the scope of work, but like sitting down and writing a proposal was just the most painful thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it was great. I got a new client, and there goes my weekend because I gotta, you want it to represent the work. I mean, getting the scope right is really important in the beginning of a contract. Yeah. It took me an hour, and by Friday, and it was really new technology. So I was like, this is incredible. Yeah. That it can. So flash forward 2 years later, and the drudgery of even meeting notes or just summaries of large information, research, but now, so 80% of that drudgery time is now collapsed and gone.
Right.
You still have the time. Where is that time going into? Are we going to get better products, better code? Because now you don't have to do the drudgery, and you can spend that time really getting, what used to be 20% of your time. Now you can, and it's critical and important. You can now spend more time there. Or
I would say it's more useful to my project managers, business analysts, people writing BRDs, that sort of stuff. For them it is a 2xer. They can do a much more thorough job of writing the code. Gotcha. And then once the BRD is created, creating that into Jira tickets, it's almost completely automated for them, right?
Yeah,
so, but that was not the value add. The value add was thinking through those few tough problems, and then the drudgery. So I may spend an hour diagnosing a problem and figuring out how to turn that into a software project. And then I spend 3 hours writing it up so the client can approve it. And now it's more like an hour and an hour, So it's definitely kind of a better thing on that. But again, software developers find it useful because again, they'll argue for 1 to 2%, improvement in their daily life by getting their vimrc file set up correctly, and that's just like configuring your word processor, right? It's not so if AI can do a little bit of that, they'll do it. And I will tell you, the number one thing they do for it is a lot of the work that we do is I rarely run into a client that is completely new, out of the box, has no data that needs to be incorporated into a new system. There's almost always some kind of data migration. And you really only do that kind of stuff once. You may do deltas, and you may, as you're going through the development process, if they've got something live going on, you're continuing to update it. But writing the scripts to do that is probably the number one thing that we've used. Now, you got to be super careful because that kind of stuff has to be really precise. So you can't just let the code writing tools write it for you out of the box like that. But it can save you, 30%, maybe 50% of the time on that kind of stuff, because they know if it's right, it's just like, God, it takes me forever to get this thing that's in my head, through my fingers onto my keyboard and into my text editor. And so writing scripts is just kind of a low value thing, but critical thing is kind of areas where it's improving, our work now. And there's, it does a great job. And I think I gave some examples in our last podcast of some of the things we're doing it. I know we're kind of running out of time, so we can save it for later. But definitely, just kind of going back to the book, the way I think it helps people create a framework to evaluate their decisions on how they're going to use AI, what they're going to implement it for, and what to expect in the marketplace. Like, is this going to be replaced or not? And so, that's why I wrote it, is I just saw so many people struggling with those decisions that I knew that a framework and a history and understanding, the road you've been on, the road we're going down a little bit better, can do a lot for your decision making. So, that was kind of the thought.
Awesome. Well, I know it's still early, but again, congratulations on the launch. If the launch of it was any indication of what's ahead, you'll be busy.
I hope so. Yeah, it was really appreciate. You kind of learn if you have any friends at all in that process, and getting those first few purchases is like, thanks guys.
Well, yeah, I know. You know how that feels with any launch. You're like watching, like, please, somebody buy it. Well, that's another, that might be another topic for another day, which is how well you orchestrated and the work that you did to make it a successful launch, right? It doesn't just happen. I know that you did a lot of prep work. I was pleased to be involved and help to promote it.
Oh yeah.
And I hope, that made a little bit of a contribution.
Absolutely.
But that's you clearly seem to have, you did something right, because it was a really nice day yesterday.
Yeah, you don't just hit number 1 in 6 categories your first day,
accidentally.
by chance. It doesn't just happen that way.
Yeah. So, well, congratulations again. We're here on a Friday, so enjoy the weekend.
Same to you,
basking in your success as an author.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.